Okay, folks, you're probably tired of watching me do 8 million interviews, but it's been an exciting 3 weeks. I've covered Tribeca Film Festival. This particular gentleman is from the San Francisco Documentary Film Festival. And of course, I'm still covering Bentonville Film Festival. So Max Mueller is here this morning. Thank you, Max, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I want to start off talking about you first before I get to Strange Bedfellows, which is the name of your film. Now, I've been checking in with people. I already know because I go to New York semi-regularly, not so much lately, but I used to. So we want to check in with folks. Obviously, we know that New York has had more troubles, I think, legitimately than some of the other states, some of the other countries, et cetera. And there have been those that have been talking about a resurgence, meaning that people are going back to art, going back to theater, et cetera. I mean, the crime thing, yeah, we're still working on that. But what are you noticing in your corner of New York?
Yeah, I mean, so for context, I'm a bit of a nomad right now. I just graduated from Stanford, so I was out in the Bay Area. I drove across the country, so that was in a week, so that was real fast. And I just got to New York this week, so I'm kind of like looking around, and I guess the thing that strikes me is that life is going on. I mean, I was here 2 years ago, right as the pandemic hit, and then was coming here like over breaks. And this feels like the most similar to what life was like pre-pandemic that I've seen. Okay. It does feel that way. I'm also in the thick of it right now. I'm like subletting a place in Manhattan, which is not, I was living in Queens before, but
okay.
I'm here for 3 months, and so the kids are partying out there. That's that's for sure. It makes me feel old. I'm like, damn.
Oh my gosh, really? Because I would have I would have pegged you because I'm a Village girl, so I like the Village very much. Michael like Queens. I was all like, I'm all about the Village because I'm an artist, and that's what you do. You go to the Village. So I would have thought for sure, definitely not Manhattan, definitely the Village. So I was wrong. I misspoke. That's okay. But good to hear that though, because there's so many people that have been looking for outlets and things to do and have been very, very frustrated. So this is good. So Stanford is one of the top of the top. And I imagine that that's extremely stiff competition. And more importantly, the level of education there is just excellent. I mean, superior relative to some of the other places. So talk to me a bit about getting your MFA there. And more importantly, there are some that do say, even at a young age, instead of getting more education, get more life education and get on set ASAP. Let's say get out of high school, maybe take a year of college or maybe some classes. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends what you want to do. I think if you're really committed to being part of like the Hollywood system, I don't necessarily think you need to go get an MFA. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in documentary from like a little bit more of a homespun, independent kind of personal artistic practice perspective. Okay. So it's perfect for that. And yeah, I think my goal going there was just to explore and produce work that would help me find my voice. But yeah, the I think the crux of the program is they just make you produce a lot of work. So we showed up, we did 3 short films in the first year, and then we're given a longer runway and did 1 sort of longer short film in the second year. I can't say enough positive things about how great the experience was, and the instruction was incredible. But I think the main thing is just it created a container in which to do the work. If someone is able to create that for themselves, that works just as well. Also, it was nice. I mean, they just select people who are really committed to the craft. And so, you know, I was able to get feedback for 2 years from peers who were just absolutely incredible and learned a ton from them. So I think that's another thing that's helpful. But yeah, I think if you really want to learn sort of if you're saying like, I want to be a cinematographer on a Hollywood set, that's a completely different thing. I think you'd be very disappointed by grad school probably and BA.
Oh, sure. Now, we talk a lot about, at least on my side of the business, because most people know that I run events, of course, one being a film festival. And one of the things that I love about cinema is that it's so artistic and has so much meaning and messages to it. And it's just a beautiful piece of artwork. However, there's a lot of talk that we have about how filmmakers aren't necessarily prepared for the business side of things or don't want to deal with the business side of things. Now, at Stanford, do they go into any of that? Like, are you educated or schooled at all about the business side of producing film?
Yes, a bit. Primarily, they talk about sort of strategies around festivals. They talk about sources of funding. That was the main sort of like business mind part of it. I think there are different kinds of students who go through there. So students that are more like know that they want to be producers, really dive deep.
Right.
I'm a kind of jack of all trades, director,
Okay.
shooter, editor kind of style person.
Mhm.
So I went deep on that,
Okay.
and not much on the business. I think it's available to you if you really look into it. We were talking a little bit, just the two of us before this, and I mean, I am about as bad a business person as exists. So, I'm looking to learn. I'm open
Sure.
to learn stuff, and I believe you'd have to know at least the basics. But I also think like I'm hoping to produce enough quality work so that people will come on and help me a little bit, because I don't think I'll ever be like
Right. Oh, sure. I get you. Now, I know that you have a background in video journalism, and of course, I'm a journalist myself, so anything relative to that fascinates me. So when we talk about the term video journalism versus documentaries, and I had heard you talk about how you found your voice, but some might say that on the documentary side of things, it is usually finding the story that is actually spoken by someone else, whereby allowing you to find your own voice. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. I think like for me, voice is really like approach and tone. There's so much to be said about the distinction between journalism and documentary. I think those lines are super blurry and it's kind of
Sure.
wishy-washy, but my sense is that the what documentary maybe affords that journalism tends to move in the opposite direction of is having a little bit more an authorial presence and like an articulation of subjective experience. And so that's kind of what you were saying. If I'm working with somebody to really tell their story, we're working together to bring out that subjective experience. And I'm not as concerned with like the facts that they have to be, I wouldn't want to be misleading, but like the main thing is not like a delivery system for information. The main thing is to bring the audience through an experience.
So it almost sounds like you're an emotional storyteller versus a factual storyteller. Because when I think journalism, we pride ourselves on facts, 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 because that's exactly what it is. There's another question there. Video journalism, like what we're doing now in a sense, is obviously different than written journalism. So why pursue the visual versus written?
I think there's kind of two answers. One is like the deeper answer and one is the more shallow answer. But
Sure.
I mean, I've always, since I was 6, have wanted to be a filmmaker. Film is my thing, and I love just the kind of like real world outside that is outside me. Filmmaker plus my interest in kind of like people and the world that pushed me into sort of like a video journalism lane. And I was sort of like, that just felt natural, and that sort of transformed slowly into documentary. There was one particular experience that did that I could talk about. I think my attraction to film comes from the fact that I'm dyslexic, and but I also, love stories, love to articulate myself. And so film was this sort of other mode of expression and this other way of engaging with stories that was kind of more natural to the way that my brain works. I think this is a guess, but those two
That's
things, I
okay.
love film and I am dyslexic. They happened at the same time. They are a part of me, and I think they're related.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I see, most wouldn't know this, but of course I researched you and found that you have produced for places like PBS and Simon and Schuster. That's a
Mhm.
pretty good gig for a young man. You know what I mean? You're not in your 40s, et cetera, and that good stuff. So tell me a bit about how that came into your lap. And then moreover, like I said, those are prestigious places. So is the pressure and responsibility much higher to get it right automatically?
How I lucked into everything I ever had. But the and you know, like I also work really hard.
Skill. Yeah.
That's true too. And there's
Hmm.
like I work hard, there's the talent, and then there's the luck, and you kind of need all of them to have
Sure.
anything work. PBS was, I had graduated from my undergrad, I'd studied filmmaking, and then took a year off from filmmaking and was just doing other things. I was working at a Montessori school and like taking care of babies, just doing random stuff, living and having a good time. And then I moved cities and ended up in Philly. And I can't even believe this, but I was basically living in a closet and my rent was like $200. And this was like a crazy experience. But
Okay.
within a week, I saw this posting for a PBS show. I couldn't believe it. And what the deal was is it was a radio journalist who had a new show and was relatively inexperienced and just looking for young people who were really hungry, who could like hop aboard the ship
Sure.
and figure it out together. And so it was, that crew was all, it was like one guy who was in his 60s and then all 20-year-olds.
Oh my God.
And it was, that was a blast, and it was also a mess. But that was kind of like my foot into the door with video journalism. And yeah, I mean, I think in terms of keeping your standards high, I have a natural inclination toward that in general. I'm
Mhm.
not, I think like maybe having the PBS name or Simon and Schuster on it doubles down on that, but I just really, really don't like misleading people. I want it to feel truthful. That's super important to me. If it's not, I can't really do it. That's, I guess, another reason why like I was well suited for video journalism, is like I just kind of, I naturally do not want to get the story wrong. It's very important.
Hmm. Look
Yeah.
at that. Well, well, well.
I'm sure you feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely. As a journalist, it drives me nuts when people get it wrong. Or,
It,
we live in a world right now where there's tons of propaganda, period, in general. Doesn't matter where it's coming from. There's just people that fabricate things. And journalists are infamous sometimes, especially more the higher up you go and more you talk about Hollywood, et cetera. They'll take a tiny little snippet and they'll stretch it like this ways. Or even like actors sometimes, like they'll be like, oh yeah, I was on this major production, and then they were on TV for 3 seconds, and I'm like, I get it, you were in the movie, but. So yeah, the lines are very blurred between the real truth and conjectured truth, which is very frustrating for me. So it sounds to me like you're never going to end up in Hollywood. I
probably
mean, do you
not.
want to end up in Hollywood?
Probably not. I mean, I love Hollywood. I think it's maybe not the right. I think like New York documentary, that's my lane.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes.
No knock on Hollywood, but this sort of suits my personality. I mean, and
Absolutely.
one thing I want to add about the getting the story right is like that's part of why I switched lanes to documentary, because I think there's like journalism that's done from an ideological perspective that
Mhm.
distorts things. There's wanting to get clicks. That's a whole nother thing. And just like trying to be
Right.
sensational. That's true. But what I was finding was when I was working as a journalist, and this is no one's fault really, it's just kind of the environment, but like we were being asked to move so fast that I didn't even know if I was getting the story right sometimes. Like it just like you had to get it done, and documentary allows for a much larger timetable where I can
Absolutely.
kind of like double check, make sure, mull stuff over, think about it, stuff like that. And I wasn't finding that there was the time for that in some of the jobs I had. So
Sure, understood. I get you. And I know you've referred to things such as autobiographical journalism. I've never heard that. You're the first person to use the term autobiographical journalism. And so obviously you can figure out what he means by that. But you, as a creator, I noticed, I found it very refreshing because I've been on radio for a long time. People have stayed very loyal to me because despite what they call a celebrity in me, I keep things very real. I'm very honest. I'm very raw and very open about what happens in my life. And I noticed that you had been very open. I'm assuming that you're referring to yourself being treated for depression.
Yeah.
There's a point down there, and I find that very brave. So I want to talk about that a bit, because there are some in the industry, we work in the same industry, that feel that your personal life is extremely personal and should be kept as such in this industry, because it's not
Yeah.
nouveau riche, so to speak, to share that. So tell me a bit about why you feel it's important for people to know that. And moreover, does the industry hinder or help you with that?
That's a really good question. I mean, I find it's hard to talk about the industry broadly, but because I'm interacting kind of in the
Right.
documentary world,
Sure.
I think there is a lot of interest in kind of like exploring ethically the fact of the matter that there is a person who that the filmmaker exists, and they may be bringing in some biases or some frames of reference, and that's going to affect kind of like what you're seeing. I haven't found people too reluctant to have there be like a personal dimension in my work, and my drive to talk about the depression. Yeah, I feel like conflicted about it, I guess, but I think it comes from this place of just really wanting to create a real community in documentary and be vulnerable. I think that it's better if there's space for people to be honest about their real life experiences in every dimension. When it comes to mental health, it has relevance for the ways that there's racial inequality in the film industry. When you think about the barriers that come in relation to class, just really bringing one's personal life into the conversation around the filmmaking, I think allows for like a more rich conversation about like what films are and how they operate. And so I think that that's part of the drive. And then part of it too is just like from an artistic perspective, I was really, really struggling for, I want to say like 5 years, and then got some therapy and had it under control enough to ask the question, like, what was that? At the same time, my last film really deals directly with depression, and I thought like this filmmaking is a tool for revelation, and I'm trying to work through this, and I think it could be pretty interesting to do that through making a documentary. So that was kind of like the thought process there, cleaned up a little bit. I mean, my artistic process is very zigzaggy.
And so do you find that when you are working or creating film, I would assume, of course, it's a natural catalyst for helping happiness to happen versus, staying stuck in depression?
Yeah, totally. From the film, I mean, I learned a lot, but my sense is like part of depression is it's kind of like a meaning making narrative problem, or it was for me. So if you can make meaning out of your experiences, that helps a lot with depression. And filmmaking is all about that. It's, it's meeting this chaotic, like difficult to understand world and forming some sort of narrative around it that is one that like helps people have a meaningful experience with it. I think that filmmaking has been like not only a tool for me to understand the things around me, but also to like live a meaningful life. It's not the only thing that helps that, but can be part of that. Yeah.
Sure. Now, before we discuss your documentary, or should I say in this particular case, oh my gosh, I like this movie so much. If I were to ask you, I never asked this question, I don't know why. So existing documentary filmmakers today, is there one you pattern yourself after, or one that you would say, you know what, I'd call them up tomorrow to work with them in a heartbeat?
Gianfranco Rosi. That's like the filmmaker I'm like loving right now.
Okay.
But at this point, like in terms of influences, I feel like I'm just kind of making it up.
I get
Like I've got my own process.
Okay.
I've got kind of my own way of thinking about things and my own goals. And I'm not like necessarily like thinking of other particular filmmakers that I'm emulating.
Sure.
I have so much love and respect for so many different filmmakers. I mean, Laura Poitras is amazing. The film Camera Person had a pretty profound effect on me by Kristen Johnson. Ross McElwee, he's from the 80s, love that guy.
Okay.
There's a underground filmmaker named Kaveh Zahedi, who's a New York filmmaker. He's very controversial, but he also makes these kind of like autobiographical films that kind of like the approach of them inspired me a lot. So
I gotcha.
those are some of them.
I just watched a documentary actually last night on Spielberg, who is one of my favorites. And so
Yeah.
whenever I think documentary, I think Schindler's List, and then I'm like, oh my God, who's going to top that? Right. And he's
Oh
such a
my
humble
God.
director. I'm like, oh my God, I would love to interview that man in a heartbeat if I were doing any more interviews. So we're
Oh
just
my
going to keep
God.
trying. Oh my God. Right.
Yeah,
He's
he would have so much wisdom.
right.
I mean, he's just a master filmmaker.
Oh, absolutely. You betcha. So speaking of masters and good projects, Strange Bedfellows. Okay. So what we are talking about today is an 11-minute film that you did in 2021. Now you created that at Stanford, correct?
That's correct.
Film there. Okay. So did you have parameters? Because I know I've talked to filmmakers that say when you do it in school, you have particulars that you must abide by. So were there any that were particularly challenging for you or more on the creative side for you?
Yeah, this was the first project where they kind of like opened the gates and were like, anything you want to do as long as it's in the ballpark of 10 minutes. And that was real hard because I had just made a film on 16 millimeter film on the Bolex camera for 2.5 months. Immediately after that, I had another film that I made in collaboration with another filmmaker that I was paired up with. And that was a incredible experience, but that, so that we did that in 2.5 months. And then they were like, third film, go. And so I was like a little bit out of energy at that point. I was like, I need a break. And it's nice to have some constraints because that sort of gets the juices flowing. I had so many different kind of little ideas. And one of them, I had seen some Czech puppet theater when I was in New York. And I was like, I just think puppets are amazing. Like they're really cool. They're kind of interesting because they're all about illusions. Like they are things that are inanimate objects but we project, our whole human experience onto them. So I just thought like, there's something there. And so I started looking around for puppets, just interesting puppeteers or people who make puppets. And I found this couple, Conrad and Elizabeth, that they were really the only people who I thought was worth reaching out to. And I thought like, this will be nothing.
Okay.
I reached out to them. I just loved them. I mean, they were great.
I know.
And I didn't really know what the documentary was. And so I had a bunch of just random exercises for school, like shoot this scene, shoot that scene, shoot something in 3 shots or whatever. And I was just like, I'm just going to do all of these with them because I love them. But I have no idea what a film would be. At the same time, I was kind of in a long distance relationship that is now a short distance relationship. And that's great. So we're living together here. Me and Monica, it's an interracial relationship. We come from different class backgrounds, and just the two of us thought like it would be interesting to explore that through a film.
Sure.
And so I had that kind of simmering on the back burner too. Once I started filming with Conrad and Elizabeth, it became clear that like thing that was really jumping off the screen was their relationship. And I realized that I had like 2 films about 2 different relationships. And I thought like, is there a way to kind of combine these? That was like the birth of like what became that film.
Okay. So there's a couple different dimensions there. So first of all, to those of you that haven't seen it before, what happens during the course of this film is that you're watching obviously the older couple's relationship, like you mentioned, but you're interjecting these phone calls, if you will. It sounds like phone calls between the younger couple as you're watching out the story play out of the olders. So you've got 2 different generations and the puppets mixed in. So to me, I'm like, basically there's 3 relationships here. Yeah. There's the younger version, the older version, and then the puppets are kind of here playing out both versions, I think. So there's Absolutely. A 3-layer dimension going on here. So there we have 3 stories in effect. So I don't think I've ever interviewed someone who's worked with puppets before, which is way cool because I'm like, okay, so I think that would be creative, but in some ways, does it bring a complication? Because I'm like, how do you set all of that up shot wise? You know what I'm saying?
It was a challenge. And in fact, I pitched this idea to Conrad and he was like, give up now. There's no way it's going to work. So he's just hilarious. I think he sort of performs the grumpy old man a little bit in just like the most charming way. That aspect of it was just shooting a ton. I just shot a ton. Okay. had a lot to work with, and then kind of massaged it in the edit. I started as an editor, and I just kind of rely on that skill a lot. That like my shooting, I think I'm very present on set, but if I make a mistake shooting, I'm like, I'll fix it in the edit.
That poses a good question, because I'm like, okay, so those are their puppets, correct? So if I've got this right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
so they've got
they,
that.
they made those puppets. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. All right, now the other side of the fence, you've got the younger couple that's talking. So we like to talk about, again, technique and method. So who were the voices? And I think people oftentimes don't give enough credit to voice acting, because believe it or
Yeah.
not, the tone and the sound and the quality of the audio all factors in on telling the story. So tell me a bit about who did the voices, of course, and what instructions were given to them. What was the most important thing for you, story
Yeah,
wise, that needed to come out of sound?
absolutely. So that voiceover, the majority of it was a real phone conversation that I had with my partner Monica. Uh,
Oh, okay. I
so
thought
we
so, but I didn't want to assume.
Yes, I've been asked that a number of times. Which I like. I like this kind of like sense of whimsy that you can't quite tell what's real and what's fiction.
Absolutely.
I had come up with this idea that we would process me shooting the film while I was shooting the film, and that would be an occasion for us to explore the dynamics within our relationship and the conflicts and think about like what it would be like for the two of us to move in together, because we were going to
Okay.
do that.
Right.
We come from really different homes, so we're trying to think like what is the home that the two of us want to create together, was sort of like
Sure.
the question. I realized that recording such an intimate conversation was going to be difficult.
Right.
We spent about a month just recording everything, every phone conversation we had,
Wow.
just so that when the recording is recording, it doesn't feel any different from just us talking to each other.
And was there any apprehension there? Because obviously, like we talked about, sometimes being intimate isn't always that easy, because these are actual private conversations. So was
Yeah.
there a point where either of you were like, yeah, we've now crossed a line that's no longer artistic, but more so just between our own dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, up to that point, this was one of the hardest things. I can remember we had like a fight, like about the recording, and
Oh boy.
it had a distancing effect early
Sure.
on, and like I hung up the phone and just had my head in my hands. I'm like, I'm ruining my film, I'm ruining my relationship, like everything is
Sure.
falling down. I think like we had enough trust in each other to just move through it. It's like any other thing in a relationship that
Right.
things come up, and you just trust that the other person is going to see it through with you. And so yeah, we kind of got to the other side of that aspect of it. And then the other thing that happened is, so the first conversation that we had that really ends up in the film was a conversation we had like the second day of me like filming of principal photography. So we were just talking about the film, talking about these things that worked great. Near the end of the film, the last conversation that we have is sort of this monologue where Monica's talking about an experience that she had as a kid. That actually came out of me. I had put a cut of the film together that I was relatively happy with, but like not 100% sold on, and I was trying to figure out where to go with it.
Okay.
And I showed it to Monica, and Monica said like, I know what the film needs. Record, like turn on the recorder now. And she just like kind of gave that to me. And I didn't know it was going to go there, but I think it was sort of like out of the collaboration that we had and out of the understanding that we had of the project, we were able to go to that place, which
Sure.
was so cool.
Oh, you betcha. So then that leaves our primary couple there. So I don't want to give too much away to those that haven't seen it yet, but I'm not going to lie. So there's things in their relationship that are very different than the normal, and
Yes.
one which you'll witness, of course, if you watch the film. So I know to them, I'm guessing that they were very comfortable with shooting this. But sometimes when people have certain rituals or practices or things like that, it can be a bit uncomfortable for the participants, etc. So how did you prepare yourself, not just as the filmmaker, but as a person? How do you, and this is more again about technique, how does a filmmaker prepare if you're uncomfortable with filming something? How do you get past that to get the final product?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, there's two sides. So me being uncomfortable and then like them being uncomfortable with the presence of the camera, which they were not. I mean, they were like, they offered that and then they offered more. And I was like, I think more is too much.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's good.
I think there was no issue there. And I really don't like to push people. Most of the films that I make are what you see is stuff that people have like voluntarily offered to me. I think that's like the best stuff generally. For me, maybe the most extreme part of my personality and maybe like my superpower is I'm super open.
Okay.
So I'm not uncomfortable with eccentric behavior really. I love it. I think it's great when people allow themselves to be eccentric. For me, a little bit where that was coming out of, it's a celebration of the fact that they figured out something that for themselves that works great for them and that they love. And I hope like other people in romantic relationships do a version of that for themselves that would look very different from them for sure. But I think like finding joy that you discover for yourself is like a great thing.
Absolutely, you bet. When I had first saw the film, that in some ways and shades, of course, the primary couple, the older couple, who are older than myself and my Michael, had shades of my relationship, which is why it touched me to begin with. But overall, I think in looking at Strange Bedfellows, I think if you asked me what the predominant theme would be, is three relationships that are just chock full of creativity and compassion and just a clear representation of what real and raw love looks like. That's my interpretation. But you're the creator, so tell them what Strange Bedfellows means to you.
I try to create films that are a little bit open-ended so that people can draw their own interpretations.
Sure.
But I tried to stay grounded in this idea that you were saying, that I'm making a film that is about love. And I want to make a film that is about love that I have never seen before, and like a different vantage point on love. I also was playing with this idea that this older couple is this sort of like beacon of love that me and my partner were sort of like moving toward, and yet their version of that is going to look completely different from ours for so many reasons, because of our identities, because of our personalities and all that. We're going to have our own version of that. I guess it's a conflict, but that reality where they've found their thing, we see it, we can respond to it, and we're sort of figuring out our thing and moving in our direction as well.
You bet. I also noticed, folks, just so you know, during the film, you get to find out about the older couple, how they obviously are together in a relationship, but they also work together. And what I found unusual was, you'll notice that Max never catches them, because Michael and I used to work together. And let me just tell you, I was crazy in love with this man, but don't think that every day you work together is that Shangri-La, because I didn't notice like any of the bickering or the, oh my God, you didn't set this up and there's not enough light and this isn't going to work, but you're not listening and this isn't right. I noticed that none of that is in this cute little movie.
Yes.
Ironic.
Very ironic. I mean, it's totally true. You can only fit so much in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were, I mean, you know, they bicker. That's for sure. Everybody bickers. I mean, if I had more time to edit or more runtime, I think it's possible that like I think like comedy duo level bickering would end up in the film.
Look at that. I do know that your film premiered at the Big Sky Film Festival. I know that it was at Hot Docs, and I know, of course, it was at San Francisco. So at this point, what's your intention? Where are you going moving forward with the film?
Yes, I'm hoping to screen it with you. So that would be lovely.
On the 24th of July in New York City. So everyone needs to come, everyone in the world, Steven Spielberg, especially you, if you can hear me.
Yes, please come, Steven. I'm sure he's
we
watching.
We love you. I'm sure he's got nothing else to do, but come and see Strange Bedfellows. Okay. Yes.
So that, and then at the moment, I've sent it out to another round of film festivals, Camden, Rooftop Films. So I'm waiting to hear back. So we'll see.
Okay.
And the reason that I was offline on promoting this is I was making another film that was pretty time consuming. But now I've completed that film, and I am sort of starting back up, putting this out into the world, and also going to be putting that out into the world, and really kind of like taking some time to engage with an audience and have conversations and get it seen. So
Absolutely. Now you took that last question out of my mouth. As far as the new project, can you tell us anything about that film?
yes, that film is going to be the most personal film I do for a while. I think I went as far as the autobiographical stuff as I want to go. I mean, it was a really interesting project. I had somebody film me do a psilocybin assisted therapy session. So I'm tripping on mushrooms in the film and processing experiences that I've had. And then I've interwoven that with, it's essentially these very short, tight stories of different people who have psilocybin mushrooms at the center of their lives in various ways. A lot of them, it's their job. There's a range of anonymity. So some people are really out in the forefront. Some people only wanted their voice in the film. So yeah, it was that was a really interesting project and experiment. It's similar to Strange Bedfellows. It's definitely a comedy. It's funny and it's fun, but it's also got a larger degree of emotional intensity to it.
Ooh, this sounds intriguing and depressing and lots of different things. I did see, of course, I want to make mention, maxmillerfilm.com is the website. And just to spell it out for you folks, it's MAXMUELLER film.com. And I also know you're on Instagram as Max Lee Miller. I didn't find you though on like IMDb or Facebook, etc. Is that the only place you are?
Yes, I deleted my Facebook. So I'm thinking about bringing it back because there's so many great film communities on Facebook.
Oh,
and I
absolutely.
Want to come in and play and hang out. So
Absolutely.
I think that's coming back. But I was like, I don't need to streamline this thing, just Instagram for a sec there. And then IMDb, I got to do my IMDb page.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure so that people are looking. So don't forget, folks, it's Max Miller and the name is Strange Bedfellows. And look for it at a theater and or screening and or anywhere near you.